Italy's most powerful mafia family taken down. Ecuadorian gangs caused 2 prison massacres in the span of a week. All of that and much more on this week's edition of Organized Crime News Weekly. Welcome back to Organized Crime News Weekly. This is the weekly show where we discuss the goings-on in the global criminal underworld. Before I start, I'll be back next week to report on more stories concerning the global criminal underworld channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. Also, please make sure to support my channel. You can do that by just contributing $2.99 a month. Any contribution is greatly appreciated, and it helps me to continue making these videos. At the end of each video, I will give a shout out to each individual who contributes. The war between Turkish gangs, the Daltons and Caspers, continues as this past week saw the murder of Furkan Yavuz in Binche, Belgium. Yavuz was a high-ranking member of the Daltons and was a close friend and right-hand man of fellow Dalton leader Kaner Kocher, who himself was shot dead just last month in Torrevieja, Spain. Yavuz himself was based in Spain until just last month in the immediate aftermath of Kocher's killing, where he himself came into conflict with members of the Casper gang. I've talked about the Daltons and the Caspers many times before, how they are 2 Turkish-based gangs heavily involved in drug trafficking and extortion. They target recruiting minors heavily through social media, and their membership is made up primarily of teenagers and young adults. Just 2 weeks before Kocher's murder, both he and Yavuz narrowly escaped an attack on them in Estepona, Spain. After his relocation to Belgium last month and prior to his murder, Yavuz was said to have been in the process of reorganizing the Daltons' activities in Belgium, and while in the country, he was being closely monitored by law enforcement. His murder this past week was caught on a surveillance camera where the shooters were then pursued by a police car, whom they eventually lost. The shooters, as of now, have still not been apprehended. While it hasn't been identified who the shooters are, it's pretty obvious at this point that it's got to be the Casper gang. To me, it seems like the Caspers have the edge at this moment, as it seems that they keep picking off prominent Dalton leaders, while their leaders remain generally unharmed. This murder case is also another example of how these gangs are spreading all across Europe. It was obviously well known that both of these Turkish gangs have strong bases in Spain as well as Italy, but cases of them haven't been as well documented in other countries throughout Western Europe, but it seems they have been making strong inroads into Belgium, Belgium being one of the top destinations for cocaine being imported into Europe. It remains to be seen if these gangs will try to get in on any of that illegal activity. The drugs that Turkish gangs tend to primarily traffic in tends to be heroin, but it wouldn't be surprising if some of these gangs are trying to muscle in on the cocaine trade, which becomes more and more lucrative every year. But the war between the Daltons and the Caspers continues, and as of now, it seems that the Caspers have the Daltons in a very precarious situation. The early morning hours of September 23rd saw an operation codenamed Restaro carried out by the Italian Carabinieri, the Italian military police. And this operation saw 26 members of the Piramali and Ndrangheta clan arrested and charged with various crimes such as mafia association, extortion, money laundering, etc. The Ndrangheta is the mafia-like criminal organization based out of Calabria in southern Italy. In recent years, they've gained substantially more power. When people think of Italian organized crime, they think of the Sicilian Cosa Nostra and its United States counterpart. But in the last 30 years, Cosa Nostra has been dramatically diminished on both sides of the Atlantic, and the Ndrangheta has picked up the pieces, and they are now arguably one of, if not the most powerful criminal organizations across the entire world, and are arguably the biggest traffickers of cocaine into Europe, with some estimating their annual revenues being somewhere around $80 billion. For the most prominent amongst the arrested individuals of the Piramali clan this past week is 80-year-old clan patriarch Giuseppe Pino Piramali, who had been released from prison in 2021 after serving 22 years behind bars, where he was placed in the 41 bis prison regime, a type of incarceration in Italy that specifically targets mafia members where they are placed in complete isolation. And Piramali was in that type of incarceration for most, if not all, of those 22 years. The Piramali clan is one of the most powerful Ndrangheta families, and their roots can be traced back to the inception of the Ndrangheta in Calabria more than 100 years ago. Much of the family's power and influence can be attributed to their hometown of Gioataro, home to not just Italy's largest seaport, but the largest commercial port in the Mediterranean. It has become one of the top destinations for cocaine being imported into Europe. The Piramali family was able to establish strong ties with cartels across South America and become the top importers of cocaine amongst the Ndrangheta. Pino Piramali inherited the leadership of the Ndrangheta from his uncle Giuseppe, and in the 1990s, Pino Piramali allied himself with the Sicilian Cosa Nostra, who at that time had gone to war with the Italian state, carrying out massacres and targeting prominent judges and politicians. And this was all carried out under the leadership of Corleone Cosa Nostra, boss of bosses, Salvatore Toto Riina, who can arguably be called one of the most bloodthirsty and savage mob bosses of all time. And Piramali was allied with Toto Riina in this war against the Italian state. In 1993, Piramali became a fugitive and was listed as one of Italy's most dangerous fugitives. He was captured in March of 1999 when he was found to be hiding in a bunker, and it wasn't until 2021 that he was released. 22 of the Ndranghetisti who were arrested this past week remain behind bars awaiting trial, while 4 of them are under house arrest. It's not known if Piramali was one of the men granted house arrest or if he's still behind bars, but if I were to guess, due to his leadership in the Piramali clan, he is probably still incarcerated as of now. So this is a major blow to one of the most powerful Ndrangheta clans. I don't think it will do anything to diminish their influence in the underworld, considering that Ndrangheta clans have hundreds if not thousands of members, and the Piramali clan is no exception to that. The Ndrangheta will continue to play a dominant role in Europe's cocaine trade. The fact that Ndrangheta clans are very discreet and they are primarily made up entirely of family members keeps them very well insulated from law enforcement. It's these 2 factors that have helped the Ndrangheta to pick up where Cosa Nostra left off in the 1990s. And unlike the Cosa Nostra, the Ndrangheta has managed to remain very obscure, and this has only heightened their influence and ability to grow and metastasize across the entire world. And this is a trend that will only continue as the Ndrangheta continues to traffic huge quantities of cocaine into Europe without many obstacles in its way. This past week saw 2 massacres occur in Ecuadorian prisons, which saw more than 30 people killed. These massacres have been attributed to the ongoing gang violence that has plagued Ecuador for the past couple of years, as Ecuador increasingly becomes the top departure point for cocaine en route to Europe. 2 most prominent gangs fighting this war over control of the Ecuadorian cocaine trade. I've talked about them many times, Los Choneros and Los Lobos. The first massacre occurred in the early morning hours of September 22nd at the Machala prison in the Ecuadorian province of El Oro. On that morning, 5 members of Los Lobos Box, a faction of Los Lobos, faked the illness of a fellow inmate, claiming that he was dying from tuberculosis. Prison guard Jose Gabriel Pacheco Ruiz came to assist the inmates without realizing he was walking into a trap. When he opened the cell door where the members of the gang were located, he was promptly shot several times and killed, as inmates in Ecuadorian prisons seem to have no problem in obtaining weapons and explosives behind bars. The inmates then managed to disarm 3 other prison guards and use them as human shields as they moved to another part of the prison where their rivals from Los Lobos Apejos, another faction of Los Lobos, were located. On their way to their rivals' wing of the prison, they encountered members from Los Choneros and engaged in a shootout with them. In the ensuing gunfight, while no members of Los Lobos Box were killed, 13 members of Los Choneros were killed. After decimating the Choneros, they reached the wing of Los Lobos Espejos. However, their rivals used mattresses to block the cell door, preventing them from entering. However, 5 members of the Apejos were injured, but no member of the gang was killed. The entire ordeal lasted 40 minutes. During the unrest, as well as the casualties, multiple explosions occurred throughout the prison, and more than a dozen inmates managed to escape amidst the chaos. In addition to 14 casualties, 14 other individuals were also seriously wounded. The second prison massacre this week occurred in the prison in the city of Esmeraldas on the border of Colombia. The violence started around 3 in the morning on September 25th when inmates from the prison wing controlled by the Los Tiguerones gang falsely reported the death of an inmate to the prison. Los Tiguerones is a breakaway group from Los Choneros and has emerged as one of the most dominant gangs throughout Ecuador. When a guard came to investigate, he was overpowered by the inmates, who took his keys before escaping their cell. As well as using the guard's key to open the cells of other members of the Tiguerones, they opened the cell doors of members of rivals from Los Choneros and Los Lobos. Armed with guns and knives, the Tiguerones attacked. When the violence was over, 17 men, including a prison guard, had been violently killed, with 2 of them having been decapitated. As with the other massacre, multiple explosions with hand grenades had also occurred. These murders in the Ecuadorian prisons this past week adds to more than 600 inmates who have been murdered inside Ecuadorian prisons since 2021. So the violence in Ecuador between gangs continues to ramp up. 2025 has been a particularly violent year with scores of massacres. I documented many different massacres committed by Ecuadorian gangs this year. These massacres often have casualties of dozens, if not multiple dozens, as Ecuador is gradually becoming the most murderous country in South America, which is something that would have been unheard of just a few years ago. But the cocaine trade obviously is a major factor in this escalation of violence, and the fact that particularly Los Choneros and Los Lobos are allied with Mexican cartels. Los Lobos with the CJNG and Los Choneros with the Sinaloa cartel. Los Choneros, especially in the past couple months, has been greatly weakened, especially with the arrest and extradition to the United States of their leader, Jose Adolfo Macias Villamar, better known as Fito. Ever since then, the Choneros have had a hard time trying to regroup and reestablish themselves, and this has only further emboldened Los Lobos, who are said to have greatly taken advantage of the weakening of their enemies, and it's thought now that they are the most powerful gang in Ecuador, and that they have displaced Los Choneros as the kings of the Ecuadorian underworld. This also draws parallels to the Sinaloa cartel and the CJNG, as the Sinaloa cartel, who are allied with Los Choneros, have also greatly been weakened, especially in the past year, and the CJNG has managed to use this to their advantage and increase their stranglehold over the Mexican drug trade. So there's parallels, even with the Mexican cartels that these 2 gangs are allied with. The Los Tiburones gang, the gang that was involved in the second massacre this week, they aren't as prominent as Los Choneros and Los Lobos, though they are gradually rising and becoming ever more prominent. It's likely they could someday, in the not-too-distant future, start to overshadow Los Choneros, but that remains to be seen. But the situation in Ecuador continues to be dire, and I'm sure massacres like these are far from over, as Ecuador continues to become increasingly more integral in the international cocaine trade. All right, that's going to do it for this week's edition of Organized Crime News Weekly. Thank you so much for tuning in. Special thanks to Julia Gates 4573 and the Green Beret Boxer 34 for contributing to this channel. I'll be back next week to report on more stories concerning the global criminal underworld. Thank you so much for tuning in.